Okay, so here is a quick review of interval notation, and you're going to see this a lot in Algebra 2, so it's super important that you understand interval notation. Okay, so when we looked at these examples, we noticed some patterns back in the day. So go ahead and if you want to pause this video and see if you notice any patterns between the interval notation, the graph, and the inequality. See if you can figure it out first, because that way you're going to actually remember it better. Okay. Now that you've kind of thought about it, hopefully you notice that, like, okay, when we have these brackets, we have these closed circles, and these signs both have the equal to bar. Whereas on this one, it's parentheses, an open circle, and these don't have the equal to bars. So if I were to write an inequality for this next example, it looks like the pattern is to write A first, so I'll write A then B. But this one has two different types of circles. We have a closed circle and an open circle. Well, whenever we have a closed circle, it means our point is included. It means it's touching A. It's actually touching. So I use a bracket when it's included. And when it's a circle on B, it means we're getting really close to B, but we're not actually going to touch it. We're going to just get real close to it. So that means that I use a parentheses. The way I would write this as an inequality is I would basically say that x is between, right? X being like any number that I choose. Any number that I choose needs to be between A and B, but because A is a closed circle or that has a bracket and it's included, I'm going to use the equal to bar. For the next example, very similar, except now our things are reversed. So we still have A then B. I use a parentheses for A now because it's not included, and a bracket for B, because it is included. So when I write my inequality, I'm saying that x needs to be greater than A, meaning it needs to go this way, or x needs to be less than B, but I'm not going to include A because it's not touching A, it's touching B. So I'm going to put the equal to sign. So here are the general rules with interval notation. We use brackets whenever we are talking about a closed circle on a graph, or when our inequalities have the greater than or less than and equal to lines. We use parentheses when we have an open circle, and we just have the plain less than or greater than, meaning that that point is not included. Another really important thing to mention is that why did we always write A then B? Whenever we write interval notation, we always write the smallest number first and then the bigger number. So we go from small to big. When you're thinking about a number line, think about moving from left to right, right? Because the left side is the more negative side and the right side is the more positive. So we're going to be from the smallest number to the biggest number. Here's some more special situations. Say I have a line where they start with A, but they're just going on forever and ever and ever and ever. Well, that forever, if we just go all the way to the positive side and never stop, that's called infinity. So when I write my interval notation, what I'm saying is I'm starting at A. This is my smallest number because I can't go smaller than A. I'm starting at A, closed circle, meaning it's a bracket, and I'm going all the way to infinity. Now, infinity means that, like, we're just never going to stop. We're going on forever and ever and ever and ever. So it's not a number. It's kind of like this idea, and it's implying that we're going on forever. So because it's not a number, we're never going to touch it. We use a parentheses. For the inequality, we can write this a couple ways. You can write that whatever we choose for x, x just needs to be between A and infinity. But we're touching A, so I use the equal sign. Another way to write this is just to say, okay, well, x just always needs to be greater than or equal to A. And it can go on as long as it wants. It can be any number bigger than A. Whereas in these last ones, remember, we had to stop it at B because it's not going on forever. We're only between the A and the B. Let's look at this next one. Really similar, except this time we have an open circle. So instead of a bracket for A, I'm going to use a parentheses. And instead for an equal to, I'm just going to use a plain greater than A. Okay, now let's look at this next one. This time my arrow is going all the way to the left. Well, I know this is like the negative side, right? We are going smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is actually negative infinity, meaning we're going to the negative direction forever and ever and ever. So when I write my interval notation, I'm not going to write B first. This is my smallest number. because negative means small. We're getting like super, 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 super small. So I'm going to write negative infinity first, then b. Because I have that closed circle, it's going to be a bracket. So remember, always think about writing from left to right. What is your smallest number on the left, and then right to your biggest number. Smallest to biggest, or left to right. So in this case, I don't want to say x is greater than, but x is less than or smaller than b. That's like a good target point. I know that it's got to be less than or equal to b. Only difference on this one is that we have the open circle, so that just means everything's going to have parentheses, and my inequality doesn't have the equal to bar. So for this one, now that we're stretching both directions forever and ever and ever, what that means is I can just go from negative infinity to infinity, meaning my smallest number is negative infinity and my biggest number is infinity. That just means all real numbers. So when you see this, you can just write all real numbers because we're talking about every single number out there. Okay, so these are a little bit different. What I want you to notice about these is we have two separate lines. So what I'm thinking about here is I've got to describe two different places where x can be. X can either be on this side of A, or we have to jump and x can be greater than b. So there's like this jump that has to happen. We have two separate lines, so there's like two different places where x could be. So when we have two separate ones, then you're going to need two like ideas. So let's just focus on one at a time. If I just focus on this one, then this means that I can go from negative infinity to a. And if I focus on the second one, this one is saying that I can be, that's an open circle, from b to infinity. Notice I'm still writing from left to right on both times. The way we make sure that we are talking about both of those, like both of those are the places where x can be, I use this U shape, which means or in math. So when there's like an or situation, meaning I can be over here or over there, we use that big U symbol. So it means or in math. So when I write this, I'm also going to have multiple inequalities. I have that x can be smaller than or equal to a, smaller or less than or equal to a, or x can be bigger than b. Those are my options. This last one you might think is a little tricky. What it looks like is we have everything colored in except a. So we're not touching a. We're going from negative infinity all the way up to a. Then we're like kind of skipping over a. And then we're going to go from a all the way to infinity. So we're still going to make sure we have to write two separate arrows. This is still two separate lines because there's a little gap in between. So we're going to have to write two interval notations. Negative infinity to a, but we're not touching a, hence the parentheses. Then we use the or, and we're starting at a again, meaning we're not touching a, we're just like really, really close to a. And we're going to infinity. Another way to write an inequality is that x just can't be equal to a. It can be anything at once, just not equal to a. Okay, so let's see if we can graph an example. We have x is less than negative 3, or, hint or means we're going to have two lines. Or x can be greater than or equal to 5. Here's my steps when I think about this. Plot the numbers, and then plot the arrows. Think about which way you're going to go. And remember that if we have the equal to's, we have a closed circle. And if they're just the plain ones or the not equal to's, we use an open circle. So I have negative 3, and then I have 5. So negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's 5. 5 is going to have a closed circle, and the negative 3 is going to have an open circle. So I put an open circle on negative 3 and close in the circle on 5. Here I have x is less or smaller than 3, so if we're smaller, we're going to this side. And when x is bigger than 5, I'm going to the right. So I'm just going to draw these arrows so that they look like this. Okay, let's do a couple more examples, and then that way you are feeling confident for your exit ticket. So it says, write each situation in interval, and we're not doing set builder notation. Interval notation. So remember, we always have to write the small one, then the biggest one. And when they write it like this, it's nice and easy because my smallest number is negative 2, and my biggest number is 3. And it's saying that x is between those two numbers. Because both of those have the equal to lines, then I'm going to use brackets for both of those. We're already done. First one's done. Now let's look at the next one. Here I have x is bigger than -1. Well, I already have one number, but I don't have two. So Miss Hindi, what do? Sketch it in your head. Let's do a quick sketch. Here I have -1, and it's saying that x is greater, so it's not included, than -1. So we're talking about from -1 all the way for forever on the right. So that forever means we're going to infinity. So when I'm thinking left to right or smallest to biggest, I have -1 all the way to infinity. Because I have this less than or greater than sign without an equal to bar, I'm just going to use a parentheses. And with infinity, we always use parentheses. Okay, now we have some graphs. So let's look at these. Here they have a line that's between -3 and 4. So we're talking about this spot between -3 and 4. So I'm going to write -3 to 4. We can have anything between -3 and 4. Except -3 we can touch, and 4 we can't. So I use a parentheses for 4 and a bracket for -3. Okay, last example. Here, I'm starting way out at -infinity, and I'm going all the way till I get to 3, and then I stop. So my smallest number is -infinity. That's where I'm starting. And I'm going all the way till I get to 3. Closed circle means I use a bracket. Okay, now that you've got this practice, make sure you understand. You can also look at your Unit 1, Day 2 notes. You can look at the teacher key or at your own notes, but make sure you practice so that you are ready for your exit ticket. Good luck.